Hello and welcome to the local campaign, helping voters make informed choices in the upcoming municipal election. Tonight we have the Waterloo Regional Council debate for Waterloo. Of the 4 candidates vying for this position, 2 will be elected on October 22nd. The candidates vying for this council seat are incumbent Jane Mitchell and Sean Strickland, as well as Jim Erb and Bisan Zubi. Speaking order was drawn before the debate, so with their opening remarks, here is Bisan Zubi.
Hi, my name is Bisan Zubi and I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited because we enjoy so much growth in Waterloo Region. I'm excited to help make sure that growth is compassionate and lifts everyone up. The elderly, people pushing strollers, and those with limited mobility should never be trapped by snow. Sidewalk snow removal on regional roads can help them. Our local tech sector needs the region's support, and we need to ensure that citizens aren't priced out of our own neighborhoods, a negative impact of gentrification that Silicon Valley suffered. And I can't wait to start using the LRT for my daily commute. But when that does happen, I want to make sure it gets off to the right start, with high ridership, robust connective routes, and extended service hours. With all that going on, why wouldn't I be excited to be here, advocating for better solutions? Naturally, people who've been around for decades will argue that it's important for steady hands with decades of experience to decide what's best for voters. But when 14 out of 15 regional councillors are running for re-election, I don't think we need to worry about a lack of steady hands. I think the real threat is a lack of fresh ideas at council. I worked on Parliament Hill for years, where I built a reputation for finding government waste, working across party lines, and communicating complex political ideas in the simplest of terms. Since leaving Parliament Hill, I've worked for several prominent NGOs, and I currently work at Communitech, where I connect Waterloo Region tech companies with local charities and create opportunities for them to give back to our community. Over the next hour and coming weeks of this campaign, I look forward to earning your trust in me, Bisan Zubi, to serve you as Waterloo's next regional councillor.
Thanks, Bisan. Jane?
In this time of change, at both the provincial and regional levels, it is important to have experienced, knowledgeable leadership. This past term, as chair of the Licensing and Hearing Committee, I guided the creation and updating of the Vehicle for Hire bylaw that regulates services such as taxis and Uber, a process that has been very contentious in other municipalities. I attend all types of events to meet my constituents. I personally answer and follow up on people's concerns on social media, email, and phone calls. I meet face to face. I care. I work on numerous committees, including the Crime Prevention Council, Alternate Transportation Advisory Committee, Budget, Planning and Works. I am the chair of the Employment and Income Support Advisory Committee, which includes Ontario Works clients and representatives of community agencies. I worked on the Waste Management Plan, which led to the successful weekly diversion of organic waste to the green bin and weekly recycle pickup throughout the region. The introduction of every other week pickup of residual garbage has saved taxpayers $1 million a year. The Biosolids Master Plan won a Public Engagement Award. A user of public transit as well as a car driver, I'm proud of my role in the expansion of the bus system and the introduction of the ION. Roundabouts and road improvements have made driving safer and easier. Bike lanes and sidewalks mean more options. I am part of the Regional Housing Master Plan. Over 2,000 units were built since 2000 and more are coming. The region of Waterloo is booming. Over $2.1 billion of development is occurring along the ION route. The region has racked up a AAA rating from Moody's for the last 18 years. I championed the countryside line and urban intensification to protect our valuable farmland. As chair of the GRCA, I work to keep the Grand River watershed a world-class river. This is only a taste of the work that I have done. I am hard work, experience, and leadership, and I care.
Thanks, Jane. Jim.
Good evening, and thank you to Rogers for hosting this forum and to the viewers for your interest in watching and caring about our community. My name is Jim Erb, and I'm a candidate in this election because those who encouraged me to run and in my own beliefs are that change is a healthy part of any organization, including municipal councils. Some candidates will argue that this is not the time for change. We need experienced politicians to deal with the tough issues that need to be made in the next term. I would respectfully disagree. Experience does just not come from being elected for many years. Experience is also gained by being an active volunteer in the community, owning and operating our family business, Herb and Good Family Funeral Home. And experience is also about bringing proven new voices and ideas to the council table. Sometimes I'm concerned that politicians who have been in office for a great length of time, and then people like me who want to serve their community and come forward as a candidate, are discouraged because of a perceived lack of experience, or this is not the time for change. Change is healthy. Change is something that should be embraced and not discouraged. To suggest that change around the council table is a criticism of those who have served is not the point. We need people who have a strong commitment to their community to serve as elected officials, and for their time and commitment, they should be commended. The region or other public institutions will not fall into chaos because new people are elected. I was a member of Waterloo City Council for 8 years and decided it was time to give other people an opportunity to sit at the council table. And to no one's surprise, the city continued to flourish. I'm hopeful that my many years of volunteer work in the community that focused on those who are most vulnerable and my experience as a small business owner will bring a valuable experience to Regional Council.
Thanks, Jim. Next is Sean.
Hi, my name's Sean Strickland. It's been an honor and privilege to serve the citizens of the City of Waterloo as your regional councillor for the last number of years. Much has been accomplished during my tenure on council, but much more work needs to be done. Since 2000, we have helped create over 2,500 affordable housing units, but the waiting list continues to be a challenge. More work needs to be done. With the construction of the ION, we have transformed our downtowns and limited urban sprawl, but more work needs to be done. We have increased our investments in conventional transit, GRT, and cycling infrastructure, but more work needs to be done. We have completed and are in the process of completing several road improvements in the City of Waterloo, including Iron Needles, Northfield, Bridge Street, and Weber. But we still need a new interchange with the 401 on the west side of the city to improve accessibility. More work needs to be done. Tax increases have been reasonable, but the recently elected provincial government has already reduced our funding. This will be the biggest challenge in the next term of council in terms of how to deal with the provincial government. More work needs to be done. With your support, I would be honored to go back to work for you and serve for another 4 years. Much has been accomplished, but more work needs to be done. Put my record of community service to work for you. On October 22nd, I encourage you to re-elect Sean Strickland. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. At this point, we'll start the question and answer portion of our debate, and I'm going to now go to Waterloo Chronicle reporter Adam Jackson.
Transportation between Waterloo Region and the Greater Toronto Area has been tagged as a limiting factor for economic development, with many businesses advocating for two-way all-day GO transit as well as high-speed rail. With the current provincial government, it doesn't seem like high-speed rail is going to be a reality at this time. What will you, as a regional councillor, do to advocate on behalf of the region's municipalities to improve the connection between here and Toronto?
And we're going to start this with Jane.
What we'll do is we'll continue lobbying. I had heard that Premier Ford said that we would still have the two-way, all-way, which I totally agree with, GO, and that'll be pretty much key to getting rid of the problems at the 401 and getting people to Toronto quite easily. So what we have to do is we go to AMO, we lobby at AMO, we just lobby all the time. A few years ago, that lobbying did work, and we worked with John Malloy, who was the MPP at the time, and we ended up with actual GO, because before that we didn't. We had the VIA, but it didn't always have good times. So the times aren't good. What I would do is I would urge the public themselves to make sure that they also lobby the government and also make sure that the provincial government and Metrolinx understands how much we need this. I know that the tech sector is working on it. we just have to keep working on it, and that's all we can do.
Thanks, Jane. Jim?
I think building up good relationships with the provincial government is a key. We do have a new provincial government and new local sitting members, and so we need to be diligent in voicing our concerns to them and making sure they understand the importance of the two-way all day. It seems to me that that will be the priority, and the high speed may be something that we have to work a little bit harder for. Through Metrolinx, through the AMO and the people who are part of the decision-making process in the ministry at the province, we need to build up those relationships that we can maintain the dialogue, and they understand the importance of the Toronto Waterloo Region corridor and how significant it is to the economic growth and to creating employment opportunities for people that live here.
Thanks.
Great question. This has been a topical issue for our community for a number of years. Councillor Mitchell earlier referenced John Malloy, so that can tell you how long we've been working on this file. I think it's important for us to make friends at Queen's Park. I think it's important for us to work with our locally elected MPPs, regardless of what side of the House they sit on, and to present to them the business case for all-way, all-day go. And that business case does exist. Currently, there are hundreds of workers who are coming into our tech community from Toronto and going back at the end of the day on buses that tech community companies are paying for. This is not acceptable. This impacts our GDP in terms of our ability to get to work and hurts on our productivity because, you know, traffic on the 401 is pretty tough, even for commuters, of course, who are going back and forth to Toronto. So we need this kind of train service. The government has canceled their commitment to high-speed rail, but has said that they would remain committed to all-way, all-day go. So it would be incumbent on the next regional council to make sure the government makes good on that promise, and we do what we need to do to work locally and also Queen's Park to present the business case and also really emphasize the quality of life issue that it has on our citizens here in the region of Waterloo. And when you think about it, in terms of a province like Ontario with the GDP and the growth and the wealth that we have, that to this day in 2018 we're still struggling to try and get higher orders of transit. It just is mind-boggling to me that we don't already have that train service. We have some train service, but it needs vast improvements, and we need to encourage the provincial government to continue these investments in improved GO service in Waterloo Region and right across the province.
Thanks, Sean. Bisan.
Coming from the tech community, I understand how huge a problem not having connectivity between KW and Toronto is. It means that we're not attracting the best talent because they feel like they are not able to go catch a Jays game after work. Those kinds of things shouldn't be this huge obstacle. So clearly, two-way all-day go, I mean, we're in agreement that it needs to happen. But I would argue that the year 2024 that we've been given by the provincial government just isn't close enough. Waiting 6 years for this kind of essential infrastructure, this, you know, really essential to our growth, essential for our ability to compete on an international scale, for talent, for quality of life, it's just not acceptable. If elected, I would lobby the provincial government to increase or to shorten that delay. 6 years is a really long time to wait. It's a long time to hold your breath for something that's so simple as getting from one city to another. I can advocate for a more ambitious timeline with any regional, provincial, or federal partner. I have a background actually in government. I worked federally for years, working on Parliament Hill. So I feel very confident in my ability to say, hi, I can come up to you, and we all have these, we have the same goal in mind, right? We all want the region to blossom. We all want to feel connected. How do we do this, and how do we do it on a more ambitious timeline? So that's what I would take to the table. We all agree that we need this, but let's try and say that 6 years is way too long to wait for this. How can we shorten that process?
Thanks. For our next question, we're going to go to the KW Chamber of Commerce.
Historically, about 30% of eligible voters in Waterloo Region or any other city in Ontario actually show up at the polls on election day. Is this lack of engagement a concern, and how can municipal governments respond?
And we'll start with Jim.
In the last couple of weeks, I've been knocking on doors, and one of the disappointments to me is that people don't even know that there's election occurring. So I share that concern. And I'm not sure if we can expect government to do everything and make sure that people are aware of elections. I think there has to be some obligation on part of the people who live in the neighborhoods, who move to our community, who take part and use the services to understand what the process is. Elections are something that not everybody is as interested in as the four of us are here. But I do think there is some responsibility of the people that live in the community as well. If the question is related, well, how do the municipal governments encourage people to vote and make them aware that elections are happening? Maybe we need to have some community workshops or public forums where they're made aware of what's happening, the same we do for planning kinds of initiatives.
Thanks. Sean?
I think it's a great question and something that I've been working on and looking at for a number of years. I think there's two components to it. One is that municipal governments need to work harder at engaging citizens and using more multimedia tools, using more modern tools to engage citizens so they can get more connected to their local governments and understand some of the pressing issues. Once people become more engaged, then they'll be able to hopefully transfer that into higher election turnout. A couple of things we've done at the region is we've changed our public information processes. It used to be we would have easels and we would talk and talking heads, and now we're using videos, and now we're using social media platforms to engage more people. We've also started to webcast our council and committee meetings, which was something that happened this past term, which has taken us quite a while to get done. And you'd be surprised at the numbers of people who watch that webcast. There's thousands who watch the webcast, which is a real improvement from what we had before. So we have to engage people to encourage them to vote. And then when it comes to voting, we really need to modernize our voting system. I know there's some questions around internet voting, but I think those bugs can be worked out. If we can spend billions of dollars a day on e-commerce, certainly we can figure out a way that we can vote using the internet where the sanctity of the ballot box is protected. I also think we need to look at having elections over longer periods of time. The election is October 22nd. We've done some work to improve the number of advanced polls, which is really good. But why not have an election starting on a Sunday and ending on a Wednesday, giving people more time to get out and vote? So I think there's some things that we can do to help encourage people to get engaged in the process. We're doing some of that work. And then also changing the way that people vote and providing more flexibility and options for them to vote.
Thanks.
Political participation is actually an issue that's really near and dear to my heart. I've been an advocate for getting involved, especially for youth. I think that our voices are often completely ignored because at the end of the day, if you're not showing up to vote, no one's going to be caring about your issues. So it needs to be a fundamental part of growing up to know about civic responsibility and to be engaged in your civic system. So I think that one part of it is definitely the education piece. We need to make sure that we are getting people excited about the ability to cast a ballot. Another thing that we need to look at is, well, how engaging is the political process right now as it stands? I can tell you, as a first-time candidate, it's a bit daunting to run against two incumbents who have been in position since the year 2000. It's difficult for me to understand where I can kind of fit into that conversation. And I have a political background. So imagine being completely uninitiated to the political process and trying to navigate that, right? So I really do think that, a natural cycle, as Jim mentioned earlier, between candidates coming and going, making more room for new, diverse voices is a really important part of that growth and that change. Another thing that I've been hearing about is that it's just really difficult to find information. People, when I've been kind of talking to them, have been confused about the difference between the city structure and the regional structure. So I do think that there is a bit of a responsibility that remains on our parts to educate and to make sure that people know the difference between city services and regional shared services. That's also an education piece that we can work on. And I think that we need to look at the populations that are often left out of conversations. Again, the youth, but also the tech community has been unengaged in the political process so far. So really getting them out, getting them interested, as well as downtown people, uptown people who really feel those impacts of municipal decisions. Let's bring everybody to the table and want them there.
I think that is a good thing, Beisan, to have everybody involved. I know that often the poor people aren't involved, youth aren't involved, and there's just people I think a lot of people are just satisfied with what is happening in the region and what is happening in their city, but then they don't go out to vote, which I think it's wrong. And then if something happens that they don't like, all of a sudden they're really engaged. But that's not really the way to do it. I think we will have a little bit more this time because we have a regional chairs. Whenever we have referendums, we have more people come out. And it's just a simple case of getting more people out. As far as internet voting, I have a different point of view. Even though I was in the tech sector a few years ago, the problem with internet voting isn't that we can't fix all the bugs and the hacks and everything. The fact is that you're using your phone and someone can look over your shoulder and see how you're voting. And until we can solve that, we're going to have a problem. I know on Facebook recently, everybody was just having a conversation about candidates going and women candidates, and women at the door saying, well, I have to ask my husband, or my husband says I can't get a sign put in. And so that kind of tells us that perhaps in some cases, obviously not many, I have a husband at home who would never do this, but there's people that are going to look over other people's shoulder and decide what are they going to vote and how are they going to vote, and making sure they vote that way. So that is the one problem that we still need to solve with internet voting. Other than that, it's just a problem. It's being engaged, certainly. I think the region over the years has become much more engaged with the public over the last few years. Certainly we have forums, we have more meetings, we have more the regional things that go out to people, and there's a lot that's done, but there is still a lot more that can be done.
Thanks, Jane. Over to you for the next question, Adam.
With the region of Waterloo in the midst of an overdose crisis linked to fentanyl and carfentanil, along with what seems to be uncertainty about whether or not the province will fund or support supervised injection sites, do you feel that supervised injection sites are the way forward, or do you have another plan to deal with the opioid issue?
And we'll start with Sean.
Sure. I think supervised injection sites are part of the solution in helping people get the support that they kind of need. I think that a lot of folks in our community aren't fully aware of the crisis that we're currently in, and it's a public health crisis. So we have at least 17 people died from overdoses from opiates already this year in our community. We have more people dying every year in our community from opioid overdose than are killed in traffic accidents, just to give you an idea of the scope and the scale of the problem. But supervised injection sites are just one component of a multifaceted solution. So we need a place where people can have that injection in a supervised environment, make sure that the product that they're injecting is clean, which is one of the main reasons for a supervised injection site. So if they do overdose, there's attendants there who are able to provide them the necessary remedies to make sure they save their lives. So with that also will come addiction support services, counseling support services. Many people who are addicted for a lot of reasons, and the addiction is but a symptom of a much deeper problem. PTSD, family sexual abuse, fetal alcohol syndrome. So it's a very complex issue. And from my perspective, and I've supported the continuation of the region's work in supervised injection sites, from my perspective, it's a public health crisis that needs some measures that our community is not quite used to. But in the past, there's lots of other things we've done to help with public health, including mandatory seatbelt legislation, no smoking legislation. Supervised injection sites is but one component, I want to emphasize, of helping to solve the opioid addiction problem in our community. We also need to look at supply, which is a whole other debate. Where are the opioids coming from? How much are doctors overprescribing? How do these addictions get created in the first place? So it's an A to Z continuum of a problem, which requires a lot of interventions, and supervised injection sites are about one component of that continuum of solving the problem.
Thanks, Sean. Over to you, Bisan.
To be brief, I support the implementation of safe injection sites in Waterloo Region. Too often, people look at the victims of addiction as statistics. Crime numbers, policing figures, health outcomes, but they're first and foremost people. They're our friends, they're our family, and they're our neighbors. And they don't deserve to die, and they don't deserve to die alone because they're addicted to opiates. We also forget that the majority of opiate addictions come into that addiction because of a medical prescription to painkillers. So this is something that started with an injury, started with seeing a doctor, and led you on this path. We need to remember that this is a fate that could befall almost any one of us. I support the region's efforts to identify the best locations for these centers, to try and resorb addicts into our social infrastructure so we can help them back on a healthy path. But at the end of the day, providing a safe, clean, and medically supervised place where they can use drugs is the appropriate approach. Just as another note, I was in undergrad when I wrote a paper on Insight, which is Vancouver's safe injection site, which was one of the first ones, or was the first one in Canada. And in over 15 years of operation, they haven't had a single person die. Whereas in the last year alone, dozens and dozens of people from our community have passed away because of this super preventable and avoidable situation.
Thanks. Jane?
I also agree with the safe injection sites, or as we have them, safe consumption sites. I visited 3 different ones in Toronto, the Works, the Riverdale, and Moss Park. I wouldn't recommend Moss Park, but the other 2 have the wraparound services, which I think are so important. People come, they inject, they wait for half an hour afterwards, and during that time, people can slowly relate to them, help them maybe first with how their feet are, whether they have a place to stay, and then if they want to go with morphine injections or they want to have a move out of drugs, they can give them help there. So that is the way to do it. We do have a problem right now because of where will the location be. And there's a lot of NIMBY. I'm not going to say that it's unjustified because people worry about what's next door to them. But we have to do this and we have to have it. So if you have a place like, say, 150 Main, which Cambridge won't like me saying this, is actually a very good place because people can anonymously go into 150 Main. You won't even know they're there. People are already going into 150 Main for extra supplies and needles which help prevent disease and other things like that. I know when I was on the school board, we had the peanut butter crisis where parents wanted to bring peanut butter sandwiches and other children were allergic. And my only answer to people was, people are dying. And this is this crisis as well. The answer is, people are dying. Are you going to let people die because you don't really like their lifestyle? Or are you going to live and give them another day forward where they might succeed?
Thanks, Jane. Jim?
I'm a strong supporter of safe consumption sites. And I look forward to the day when the provincial government will hopefully permit this to happen and we can have some here in the region of Waterloo. We need to save lives, and there's just no other way that we can do that. I think one of the key things here is we need to remove the stigma from addiction services. This is a healthcare issue, and we have to be prepared to treat this as we would any other healthcare concern. Remove the stigma so those who are suffering with the addiction and to the family members who are also suffering with the addiction feel comfortable in getting treatment and that the community responds to it in a way that they would with other healthcare concerns. I just finished taking a leadership role in the House of Friendship Capital campaign to build a new addiction treatment site, and they're centralizing their current locations. And the one thing I learned through that process is the stigma is so significant, but it is a curable addiction. And if we can create environments where people can come and get the proper treatments, this can be cured like we can cure many, many other health issues. And it's just not one solution of a safe consumption sites. There are many, many other things in this fascinating, complicated healthcare thing, and we have to look at all of them. But I think the bottom line is it's going to cost us more not to deal with the issue than it is to deal with it.
Thanks. Next question, Adam.
Efficiency within municipalities has become a hot topic within the recent days with the provincial government. Do you feel that there's any room for efficiencies, i.e., removal of councillors or the A-word amalgamation within our region?
And we're starting with Bisan.
Me.
Yeah.
I think there's always room for efficiencies. When we look at the region's budget, we're looking at, you know, 1.2 billion in revenue, and we're basically spending that exact same amount. When we look at the infrastructure of our government, we're seeing that there's two tiers. People are confused where their property taxes are going. I wouldn't necessarily use the A word. I believe it's a bit premature to say that. I have been in situations where regions or cities have amalgamated, and it actually hasn't ended out that well for people who live in downtown cores, who rely on services that exist in downtown cores as those get diluted throughout the townships or you know, the suburban areas. So what I would really look at is, how are we spending the money that we are taking in as efficiently as possible? How are we maximizing the amount of good that our government is able to do for people here? I think we need to be careful with how we take money in and how we spend it. I will always advocate for judicious spending money, the government money. You have to spend it like it's your own, right? It's your own budget, and you have to be as kind of fiscally responsible as you can. That's not to say that we should be cutting things or that we should be scaling back service, but we should be really looking at how are we allocating that money? How can we be more efficient with that allocation? And where are the gaps, and how do we kind of fill those gaps?
Thanks, Bisan. Jane?
And that is something that the region has been doing for many years, is staff absolutely always is looking at what are our services, where can we make it more efficient, what are we doing, and they bring it to council and we say, yes, that's good. A few years ago, we actually had an outside consultants come in and also look and see, how are we doing? What are we doing? And they found generally that we were pretty efficient. They had a few ideas such as stopping regional childcare, which went over like a lead balloon. But overall, they felt the region was doing well. As far as amalgamation, I think we need to think about the fact that when we had the referendum, Waterloo really liked the idea. Kitchener did not, or sorry, Waterloo hated the idea, and Kitchener really liked the idea. So it didn't really go anywhere. But what we do need to think about is this provincial government is looking at ways for efficiencies, and they mean less councillors, less politicians. So we sort of squeaked by the last time this came up with the Harris government, but this time it may come. And I think we need to have, once again, experienced councillors, because the last time at the beginning of the 2000s, I was there when EMS was amalgamated and the police were amalgamated and other services became amalgamated, not all of them. So I know how that works, and I know what can go wrong, I know what can go well. But this is something we really do have to think about, because it may be coming down the pipe, and with this government, we won't have a referendum, we won't have a choice. It will just happen.
Thanks, Jane. Jim?
I think the key for the region is to continue the innovation of streamlining services and creating more productivity. However, I think we all are aware that we have a new provincial government, and their mandate seems to be that they're prepared to take action on many things that others feared to do in the past. And so if I would be fortunate enough to be elected to Regional Council, one of the things I would encourage Council and our staff to is to be proactive in talking and meeting with the provincial government, with our local MPPs, to ask what are your expectations of the region? What do you want us to do that's more efficient? How would you like us to be restructured, so that we can gather some input from the community to respond to what their expectations are, that we have an opportunity to make some recommendations back to them based on how the region functions. I think right now the region provides 70 to 75% of the services that residents of the region of Waterloo use every day. And so what other services are there that you would like us to, that the region should assume, or that we can create more efficiencies? But the key will be opening a good line of communications with the province, getting public input as to what it should be, and that would certainly be a goal of mine.
Thanks.
This is it's a good question in terms of efficiencies, and you know, the size of the regional operating capital budget is approximately $1.6 billion. And by legislation, we have to run a balanced budget every year. We can't run a deficit. We run small surpluses from year to year. but it's a very important component of managing the services that we deliver to the region of Waterloo. And of that 1.6 billion operating capital, we get about $270 million from the provincial government. And so one of the concerns I have for the next term of council is what's going to happen on the finance side with respect to that potential reduction in operating funds. In terms of maximizing efficiencies, I, as Chair of Admin and Finance and Chair of Budget, I advocated for a service review a number of years ago. It came back with several recommendations, most of which Council did not support, but I did support. One of the things we were able to get through was an airport master plan. And with the airport master plan, we put a focus on economic development of the airport. And we also put a cap on what kind of contribution the local taxpayer is going to make to the airport. Right now, the airport runs at approximately a $5.5 million deficit. And we put a cap on that and said that we're not going to spend any more than $23 per household to manage the airport. So we're doing some things to maximize efficiencies. Every budget cycle, staff come back with a service review. They do an internal service review, and on average, we save about $1.5 to $2 million a year just looking at the services that we deliver on a line-by-line basis. I also would like to say that during the budget process over the last number of years, I have personally made dozens of recommendations to reduce programs that I did not think were that quite appropriate for us to move forward on. In many cases, also have deferred programs and found innovative ways to fund programs rather than putting them right in the operating budget in 1 year. So we have been flexible, we have demonstrated efficiencies. Just quickly on amalgamation, in 2000, we did reduce the size of regional council by 4. Some cities also reduced the size of their council in the region, but they have since increased their councils. So we're very much aware of this issue, and I'm open to ideas on governance.
Thanks, Sean. Back to you, Adam.
The second stage of the ION LRT is extending into Cambridge in about 10 years. That is the current plan. Taking the region's first foray into light rail transit construction into consideration, what, if anything, do you recommend is done differently for stage 2?
And we'll start with Jane.
I think we have to do stage 2. We've seen $2.1 billion of development through stage 1, and we haven't even got the trains running yet. So for Cambridge, this will really help them. So once we get the route and the proper route, Cambridge is going to boom, and that will be good. Some things I would look at is when we, well, let's face it, let's take the elephant in the room, Bombardier. I think when we do stage 2, we really do have to think carefully about, has Bombardier improved? Are they doing better? Should we use them? Should we do somebody else? Other than that, I think the system is going to work really well. I'm hoping that what will happen is we will have it seamless, so it goes from Fairview Park right down to Ainslie, so you've got it going from Conestoga Mall right down to Ainslie, and that will be beautiful. We also need to have and continue to do more express buses into that spine that goes down, more buses that go east-west that are express buses, just making sure that people can get on the I-Express and use it. And absolutely, Cambridge is the second part, and we need it really badly.
Thanks, Jane. Jim.
I think the expansion to Cambridge is integral in making our region feel like one community. And I would support that we determine the routes that are compatible with the city of Cambridge and the people that live there. I think it's important that we lobby the provincial government that they fund this 100%, like they have funded other trail or light transit systems in other parts of the province. That was not the original deal when we built this first stage, and so I think that's important. I think it's important to learn from the lessons or some of the things that maybe didn't go that well in Kitchener-Waterloo so they don't repeat themselves in Cambridge. I sat out looked outside my office window for 2 years with no traffic on King Street. And I must say that the communication from the region was not what it should have been. And so I think we need to look at how we communicate better with the people who are affected by the road closures that are going to happen, how it affects businesses, the people moving around in the community. But we definitely need it to make this a seamless region from one end to the other, and I fully support it.
So I think with stage 1, we got a lot of things right. We have over $2 billion in new development. We've transformed our cores in Uptown Waterloo and downtown Kitchener. We've intensified our cores. We've increased the number of people who live and work in our core. So we've really changed our cities. And so we've done a lot of things right. And right from the first time that we approved stage 1, we had a motion to approve in principle stage 2. So I've been there all the way along to support the expansion of LRT into Cambridge. There's a couple of things that we could learn from stage 1. Bombardier, of course, has been a problem. That's been a real challenge for us. And so when we procured Bombardier, it was a sole source contract. And the reason we made that decision was because we were piggybacking on an order with TTC and Metrolinx. It made sense. It was supporting Canadian jobs. So that's something I think we may want to revisit the next time around in terms of the procurement model. Communication certainly needs to be improved. Also kind of inside the beltway kind of thing in terms of the construction consortium itself. I think we need to spend more time integrating with the local utilities, integrating with the local cities. The construction of the island was more complicated than I think the project company that was doing it, Grand Link, was aware of at the beginning. And so that created some problems getting out of the gate. So I think we need to do some more forward planning and team integration before we actually put a shovel into the ground. But I think the benefits that we can deliver to Cambridge with stage 2 of ION are and will be phenomenal and could match what we've achieved already in uptown Waterloo and downtown Kitchener. So we need to move forward and make sure we get 100% funding.
Just really quickly, yes, I do agree with stage 2 taking the trains to Cambridge. But with all due respect, we have skipped a really important step in this conversation, which is service, like getting that service to where the train tracks have already been built, right? I live in uptown Waterloo. I work in downtown Kitchener. I have been waiting for this service to begin since I moved here. We all know that the budget was $818 million, and then it ballooned to $868, and that's because of the delays on the trains. We also know that the service was expected to launch in July 2017. That was pushed back to December 2018. I don't know if it's going to be starting in December 2018, or maybe it'll be a springtime start. So clearly there are issues that we need to face right now before we look at stage 2. I'm really excited to start using it. We've had a lot of downtown and uptown businesses who've actually gone out of business because of the construction, because of that delay. We didn't pay all that money, have all those local businesses suffer, get so much disruption, wait 2 extra years so that when the service launched, that we would only provide service to a segment of the population. People who need to get home late at night need to be able to use the ION trains. Right now, the plan is to have them peter out towards 12 or 1 in the morning. But what about people who are coming home late after work? What about people who are working in bars? They are taxpayers and they deserve as much access to this infrastructure as 9 to 5ers. When I moved here, I saw that the tracks were mostly done. I was also told that the trains were delayed. And without really asking, I knew it was Bombardier that had made those trains. It's their reputation to deliver things late. It's not a surprise. It shouldn't have been a surprise. We should have gotten more than $4 million in late fees. It's cost us a lot of money. So that's obviously something that I would revisit in going forward on stage 2 is looking at that agreement.
Thanks, Busan. And back to you, Adam.
With the cost of both buying and renting housing increasing, what do you feel the region should and could do to create more affordable housing or to influence the private sector to create more affordable housing?
We'll start with Jim.
Thank you. Affordable housing is an issue that we need to really pay some attention to. And unfortunately, with all the intensification that has happened along the LRT line, a lot of the people that at one time could afford to live there have been displaced and removed further away from that area. So one of the things with the LRT that we need to make sure we do is that, depending on how far the affordable housing is away from the line, that there's adequate transportation to get them in from the suburbs to the main line, because the people who need the affordable housing are not able to buy cars and need the public transportation. I think we need to have conversations with the provincial government. Both the federal and provincial government have initiatives right now to provide affordable housing, and we hope that they'll follow through on those commitments that they have made. there's always this question that we need to work with the private developers, that some of the development that they do has to contain affordable housing units. And I think that's all fine, but I think it also has to, in the private sector, you have to be able to make a living. And so will there be some incentives from the provincial or federal government or the local municipalities to subsidize perhaps 1 or 2% of the units in new developments? It's increasingly difficult for young families to find a home that's going to be affordable. And for all of us, especially those with young families and are looking for homes, we wonder what the future really holds. So I think it's going to take a combined effort of all levels of government to make sure that we can provide that affordable housing.
Waterloo Region is recognized as one of the premier service providers of affordable housing in the province. We punch well above our weight. When the government makes announcements and allocations for municipalities to spend money on affordable housing, many municipalities don't take the money. But we take the money and then we leverage that and pay on top of that to create more affordable housing units. Our affordable housing unit budget right now is $100 million, including operating, $111 million, including operating and capital. So we are recognized across the province as a leader in providing affordable housing, but more needs to be done. We've created 2,500 units since 2000. Our next plan is to create 500 more in the next 4 years. We need to do more, but we also need to find help from the provincial and federal government. So there's much hope with the federal announcements for affordable housing that they recently made in their last budget. But the roadblock is the provincial government has to provide some matching funding as well. So we have to encourage the provincial government to continue to support affordable housing and allow the Region of Waterloo to spend our money and match with federal and provincial dollars to bring these units into the marketplace. So I think it's important to recognize what we've done. We can't rest on our laurels. We need to continue to move forward. I also think that there's options within the Planning Act. And the cities and the arcane nature of municipal government, the Municipal Act, so on, the region has certain areas of responsibility, but the cities have other areas of responsibility. So we set the official plan, but cities are able to do their own planning. And within that planning for condominium units, for example, they can bonus, they can do a density bonus, which the region has already said we would support, to add another floor onto these new condos and provide some incentive to the developer to do that and designate those units for affordable housing. We can do that. Those tools are there.
Thanks, Sean. Bisan.
I think that the conversation around affordable housing needs to be one that's central, especially around intensification. We're talking about how Waterloo, especially Uptown Waterloo, has approved a lot of new builds. There was actually a council meeting a couple nights ago where a new building in the old post office was approved, and it's actually much taller than any other building on King Street has been. I wasn't really offended by the height, but what I was offended by was that there were no affordable housing units and there were no family-sized units included on this brand new build. It's also interesting that the entire that the condo has a podium for family use, but families won't be able to live inside the building. I think what we need to be looking at as a region is how do we incentivize the creation of affordable housing, the creation of mixed-use residential. I will be honest, I don't really see additional funding coming from the provincial government. It doesn't seem to be one of their priorities that they've stated publicly, and I think that we could have more success lobbying for other things rather than that. So what I think that we need to do is work with the private sector, work with developers. They want to do it. I've had good conversations with them. They want to actually be serving this need, but it doesn't make sense if they're just losing money and it's out of their own pocket, right? So we as a region, we can work with the cities and we can get them all on board to make this into a priority. One last thing that I would say is that I actually had a really interesting conversation with Carl Cadigan, who's the Executive Director of Reception House, which is a local charity that works to place government-assisted refugees in our city. And he was telling me that one of his main problems with landlords is that sometimes they'll actually keep properties empty rather than subsidizing them and having them at a lower rate so that these families can afford to be there. So we have all these empty properties, especially around the university, that aren't being used. So we need to be looking at what we have, how we use it better, and how do we grow.
With a booming economy and better transit and better roads, which includes Weber Street, which once had a lot of rooming houses on it, we have a problem now of affordable housing. The prices of houses have gone up, and we also have a problem with there's more homelessness because people that did have a rooming house no longer have one. So what the region has done in the last little while is they're working with community partners to reduce homelessness And that means that people are given a home and they're given supports. Because a lot of people that are chronically homeless, there's a reason why they're chronically homeless. They end up, you give them the housing first, and they might end up evicted. Or you give them the housing first, and they have mental problems because of just being indoors and in a house. So what the region is doing is working with partners, and we're having people that will help them. And I know I was talking to Gail Gilbert from SHOW just the other day, and she was saying we need more housing for homeless, but we also need the supports, and that is extremely important. The other part we have is that we have affordable housing, that the average family, the average person, it's getting really expensive for them to buy a home. So one thing that the region's been doing is we have where people can get a $25,000 amount, and then they can, say, redo their basement and have a duplex, rather than just having, and actually that is how my family got our first home. We had, because we live in Waterloo, and this is a really good one for Waterloo, we turned our basement into, 2 students lived in our basement for many years until we had the money and the income that we didn't have to have them there anymore. And maybe in my later years, they'll be back because I have a bungalow. And so that is one idea. But we need to get together, and I know staff is working on that, on a conference like we did with intensification, with developers, politicians, citizens, advocates, everyone getting together and looking at unique ideas for having affordable housing. And of course, Sean just mentioned one idea that we have, and we've mentioned this about having the houses in there.
Thanks, Jane. So we'll move now to our closing statements, and we're going to start with Sean.
Oh, okay. Let me find my note here. I would like to thank the moderator and all the people who participated in tonight's debate, including my opponents. I'd also like to thank Rogers staff and Rogers and 570 for this municipal election program that they're running for 2018. And I'd like to thank the viewers for tuning in and becoming aware of the issues. I strongly encourage as many eligible voters as possible to get out and vote on October 22nd. There are several advanced polls that are also available if October 22nd is not a convenient date for you. To learn more, I encourage you to visit SeanStrickland.com. There are 4 key issues in this election: affordable housing, transportation infrastructure, growth management, and the changes we can expect from the provincial government. On all of these issues, and many more, I have the proven leadership and experience to successfully manage whatever comes our way and continue to make the right kind of investments to keep our community moving forward. Balancing moderate tax increases with improved services has been a hallmark of my tenure as a regional councillor. Together, we have accomplished much, but more work needs to be done. On October 22nd, with your support, I would be honored to serve the City of Waterloo as your regional councillor. Put my record of community service to work for you. Now is not the time for a change. The possible changes from provincial government are going to require a steady hand, experienced leadership, familiarity with regional programs and budgets. On October 22nd, I ask for your support. Help re-elect Sean Strickland. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Be sad.
I'll be honest, running for regional council was not part of my plan. I'm fortunate, both professionally and personally, to be building a fulfilling life in Waterloo. Deciding to leave my comfort zone to offer my name on a ballot was a difficult decision to make. But something else I'd like you to know about me is that I love voting. Love. I get excited thinking about going to that polling station, whatever church, public school, community center it is, and seeing all the volunteers and election workers, casting my ballot, sharing my hopes for the future. But as voters, when we're not given a real choice, real vision, compelling ideas, or compelling candidates, that excitement's harder for us to develop. Our region has a proud past and a bright future. We are so privileged by our choices. We can choose to be a Waterloo that supports people from all walks of life by thinking about everyone's ability to belong and contribute to our community. We can build a Waterloo that grows up, not out, is vibrant and compelling, a hub of innovation and culture. We can do all of this in a Waterloo where young families can actually afford to buy homes and where young people want to stay and build their lives. So many of you tell me you share this vision, and so many of you are disappointed in how these challenges have been addressed. In my job, I see on a daily basis the opportunities this region has lost because we can't retain the young people that we need to grow. These challenges aren't new. Local politicians have been talking about these issues for decades. Waterloo needs fresh ideas that can energize and engage citizens from all walks of life. Please visit my website, beisan.ca, that's BEISAN.ca, for more information on my policy ideas, to find out more about me, or to contact me. I look forward to meeting you, sharing more of my vision for Waterloo Region with you, and hearing yours as this campaign progresses. And I look forward to earning your vote on October 22nd, and again, every day afterwards.
The region of Waterloo and the city of Waterloo have long been part of an evolving vision. Manufacturing of rubber, sausage, buttons, and beer evolved into ideas and technology. Almshouses evolved into the House of Friendship, Show, and the Working Center. Here are a few issues that are requiring that our region evolve again. Climate change, which hasn't been spoken of tonight. We need concrete actions to reduce emissions and mitigate climate change. The cities in the region have pledged to reduce emissions by 80%. Listening to the new ideas of environmental organizations like REAP and TriTag will help us to reduce and mitigate. Cycling. As a teen, I used to cycle safely all over Waterloo. My older daughter was hit by a truck while riding in a painted bike lane. Cyclists advocate the new idea of segregated bike lanes and bollards to keep cyclists and cars separate. Affordable housing, which we have talked about recently. Our vision must evolve when a booming economy, road, and transit development create the unintended consequence of more expensive housing for citizens. Regional staff is already working on a conference that brings everyone together, and we're already placing the hard to house and giving them the needed supports. Opioids. The regional integrated drug strategy has 4 pillars: prevention, harm reduction, rehabilitation and recovery, and enforcement and justice. It's not just about safe injection sites. Economic development. The ION has already bought new space at the long vacant NCR lands, but we need an aerospace industrial park. It's not just about passengers at the airport. It's about also business and industry. New provincial government. I have been a councillor through Conservative and Liberal governments. We need to be flexible, lobby, and evolve to keep Waterloo Region thriving. I work hard, I lead, and I care. You can find out more about me and my take on the issues at janemitchell.ca.
Thanks, Jane. Jim.
I consider myself a team player. In business and as a community volunteer, I have demonstrated a willingness to listen, consult, and then bring everybody together to reach an acceptable outcome. I'm hopeful that those experiences learned in business and in the community would be an asset as a member of Regional Council to represent the City of Waterloo. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you during the last couple of weeks at your door or on the street, and I value those conversations and the thoughtful responses to what you see as important issues facing the city and region. And I've heard that we share many of the same concerns. Continue the work of providing affordable housing, responding to the opioid crisis, promoting the region as a single destination to attract employment opportunities for our residents, protecting our environment, infrastructure, transportation, and creating a community where everyone feels they are included and belong. I believe change is healthy for any organization, including municipal governments, and I would welcome the opportunity to be part of that change. The City of Waterloo has 3 representatives on Regional Council, the Mayor and 2 councillors who are elected at large for the whole entire city. It would be my honor to receive one of the 2 votes you have to elect a Waterloo representative to Waterloo Council. I extend my best wishes to my colleagues Isan, Jane, and Sean for their commitment to our community and being part of this campaign. And I thank you for joining us and caring about the future of our region.
Thanks, Jim. And that concludes the closing statements. I'd like to thank you all for participating tonight, and be sure to tune in on October 22nd for all of the up-to-minute results in the local election. Thank you and have a good night.